Let's see if this works. Yes. Okay. First question, why would you want to do this when there's like thousands of color schemes that are out there and that you can use? Yes. And there's some reasons you might want to use it. You can create the perfect scheme for you. So if you use some scheme off the internet and there's something that you don't like about it, you can fix it. And you can also fix things on the fly. So I mean, if you use someone else's and something looks wrong to you, you can override it, I guess, or you can like try to like contribute to it and send a patch or whatever. But if it's your own, it's like 2 minutes, and any like problem you see is fixed. And also, it's an easy way to write some, or to start writing some Vim script. There's some things that, like some functions that you could write that, like if you want to just start out a Vim script and you have never written any, it's an easy way to get something done. So what I'm going to talk about is first, how does syntax highlighting work in the first place in Vim? So from opening a file to you have colored words on your screen, what are the steps Vim takes? Then what are the commands you use to define your color scheme? Some gotchas, tips and tricks for doing it, and then some things to think about when you're choosing how to color your things. Next slide. Okay, so you open your file. First, what Vim does at a high level is it will figure out what the file type is. Second, it will open the syntax file for that file type. So if you open a Python file, it will open the Python syntax file, which is used to figure out for each word or symbol what syntax group it has. And then it will use color scheme, which like specifies for each group how to color it. Alright, just wait a second or just continue?
Yeah. I think it's good.
Okay, so the figuring out what file type you have. It does this by first looking at the extension of the file type, then maybe looking at the content if you can't figure it out from the extension, or if there's more extensions per file type, or you can also manually set it. And it's possible to configure this by setting a file in your home vimfst directory, which contains something like this. So for instance, I had to do this because this is if you see on the top left, it has an MD extension, which Vim thinks is a modular2 file, which is some very old language. And so you can overwrite this in this file by saying on new file or renew file. With this extension, you set the file type to Markdown. Quick aside, maybe some Vim script type stuff. This AU exclamation mark point command here. This will remove any other command for these events. So buff new file, buff read are events, which anytime an event like this fires, it will do whatever it says here. And there's also something called a group. There's a default group, and there's a file type detect group, or I define it here. And so it will clear these events, and then it will override them with whatever command follows. Okay. And there's also other ways to override this, including you can override all of them, where you have to specify each mapping yourself, or you can overrule it only if it hasn't found one. Or you can link one file type to another. So you can say, if it thinks it has a markdown file, then I want you to use my syntax highlighting. Or you can also read the content of the file and according to that figure out what file type it is. And if you type help file type, you'll get all this in a lot of detail. So once it has figured out what file type it has, next comes running the syntax file for the file type. So again, if you have a Python file, it will load the syntax Python vim file from the vim runtime. And this consists mostly of 3 types of commands. The first is, so it's trying to set for each word in the file, or for each symbol in the file, it sets the syntax group this file belongs to. And there's 3 commands to do this. The first is to match words. So this will just match any word that you specify. So this command here will say that, okay, any of these words here, elif, else, or if, will get the group Python conditional. Or here, for instance, it will say a markdown ordered list marker, which is the 1, if you see in the corner there, 1 is highlighted in yellow. This is the group it has, and it could set the same group for the word according. And now I can try to execute this. And you see the according word has now the same color as the 1. And there's other ways, for instance, matching on some regular expression, or matching on a region where you have one regular expression for the start of the region and one regular expression for the end. So this, for instance, is from the Python vim file, which matches a Python string, which is some regular expression. It can start with a U in front of it, which means it's Unicode. It can have some quotes, and it has to end with the same quotes. But we want to skip all the quotes in the middle, which is this fun thing here. If it has a slash in front of it, or an escape. It can contain other loops. So at this point you might ask, what about if you have an if in a string? How does it resolve that? It resolves it just whatever comes last will be used. So in the Python vim syntax file, it will first define the Python conditional, and that will define the string, and it will use the string because that comes last. And if you don't like how this works, you can also configure that by going in your home vim after syntax language, which then would be the language you want to modify file. And this will be automatically loaded after the normal syntax run, so if you want to make any modifications, you can do it there. Quick aside, something I didn't know while I was preparing this presentation, reading the help files, I came across this command, which is actually pretty cool, where you say to HTML, and it will take the current window and transform it into HTML. So I can now write the written this file, and suddenly I have an HTML file on my window. All right, next slide. I should close that. Can't. Again. Okay. Now close. All right, back here. And next slide. So, once it's figured out what the syntax is, what group each word has, it will start executing any color scheme you have. And the main command to define your color scheme is the highlight command. You don't have to write out highlight, you can just write hi for short. And this will looks like this. So first you say highlight, then you say what group you're defining it for, and then you give certain arguments, which are, for the GUI version of them, it's GUI FG for GUI foreground, GUI background, any modifiers. And for the terminal version, it looks like this. So let's first see how this does. Execute it. So you see the H1 markdown group, which is what the top thing is, now has a foreground color of red, a background color of white, and is bolded and underlined. Okay, so the options for this are slightly different for the terminal version and the GUI version. Mostly the GUI version has an additional option for GUI SP, which is the color of the underline. So if you define some kind of error colors, for like syntax checker or whatever, this will be the color of the underline squiggly that you get. And also the font, which most color schemes don't use, where you can have a separate font for a separate syntax group, but I haven't seen that used. Okay, so the GUI options for the colors take a 42-bit RGB hex code, you can see up top. The CTerm options take a number in the 256 color terminal palette, if you have a 256 color terminal. Some terminals don't support 256 colors, and then it's another palette, usually 18 or 16. And the palette looks like this. So the link is there. If you ever want to create your own, this is it. And the other option you can use is to link. So, for instance, the syntax file, which defines your groups, usually also links them to some broad group. So there's a generous statement group, and the syntax file will link the Python statement group to this group to use the same color. And this is how, you start usually by defining for the general groups, and this will then go down to the language group, so you don't have to define something for each language. Next. Okay, so there's some problems. Let's just remove this. There's some problems with the highlight command, namely that it does not overwrite what was there before. So, for instance, this is another one that will change it to be red on white and italic. Now if you do the next one, which doesn't have anything about the background or GUI, it won't override it back to normal. So it now is still background white and italic. So it is good practice to use some of the defaults. There's two, or I guess three. Either none, which will make it transparent, or there is FG, which will set it to the same color as the normal syntax group. There's one normal, which is what it's used for everything that's not something else. And the BG, which is for the background color of the normal group. This is, okay, so this is how you get around this, but sometimes you don't want to get around it because for, say, if you just want to change the background color, if you're creating a color combination for a div, the div colors, you don't want to overwrite what's on top. You just want to change the background color. And for that, in that case, you actually don't want to overwrite it. Linking groups, if you link like Python comment to comment, this makes sense, so you don't just set it for comment and it's for all languages. On the other hand, if you link like statement to keyword, it can be problematic that you change the color in a broad group and it cascades down to all the others and you're not sure if you really want that. You might not want every situation where the link happens to also take the change. So linking can be dangerous. And it's also hard to see which color group is. So you can't define variables for them because hex colors cannot be variables. So if I execute this, no, it does not like to have a hex color as a variable. Okay, so some way to get around it is to write some vim script, where you can, for instance, write a function that takes the group name, takes the foreground color, background color, GUI and GUI USP, and then for each you check, is there something in the string that was passed to the function? If it is, then take it. If not, take some default. And so you can define your color as a variable. So here I'm saying, okay, this variable should have this hex color and this terminal palette color number, and then I just pass it. You see here I pass it to this function, which does all the work. And this might be interesting is the execute command, which takes a string and executes it as if it were a command. And this period is the string concatenation operator. So this call here is equivalent to running this big string or big command. Yes, and you can also define a similar function that does it without the defaults, but you still can use the variables. Okay, let's go back to Markdown highlighting and the next slide. Okay. There's a plugin called the Hex Highlight plugin, which allows you to have a toggle where it will replace all hex colors with the actual colors. So this makes it a little easier to see which color you're using for which group. Then there's also another function that will show you the syntax group of whatever is under your cursor. So the first thing, I can call this function, and it says this is part of the Markdown H1 group. And then you can use this information to define your color. And while I was putting all this together, I thought maybe if I'm collecting all of it, then I might as well put it all in a project. So I started this yesterday. It doesn't have that much in it, but the idea would be to have a set of source code files in various languages to try out this color scheme on, to have the plugin plus the function and that stuff, and to also have like some color scheme to get you started. So there's not that much there at the moment, but if you check back in a week, maybe I'll get around to adding some more. Okay, so you are making your color scheme. What colors do you use? So one idea is to use the same color for things that are similar. And now the question is what syntax groups are similar. So you might have like these four. So that's the statement for any statement, conditionals, loops, and operators. And let's highlight this. So this is the actual highlighting. And you see that if you, this is a conditional here, the is not is an operator and the and too. So this makes it easy, for example, in an if statement to see the different parts and how they're chained together. Whereas if you make the operator something else, then suddenly it gets slightly more confusing. Or at least I think so. I mean, this is kind of like subjective. So anyone prefer the second one, out of curiosity?
What?
Anyone prefer the, yeah?
Yeah, just so.
Okay.
I usually like calling my operators because in various languages like C or C++, you don't have pretty much almost non-coloring, yeah? And it's kind of useful when you do math or whatever to just see the pluses and braces, like, to me at least. So it's, I don't know.
So you would also want them in a different color than say the ifs?
Sure, yeah.
Right, I mean, that's interesting. I mean, And then some other thing that you might want to make, like anything that is exceptional in your code, make it like a very different color than the rest. So for instance here I made so that might be exception handling code, import code. I mean import code isn't really exceptional, it's on top of every file, but it still pops out of you if you put it in the function, which you can. So might be a good idea. Any meetup programming, def macro, anything like that. Probably nice to make it stand out. You can see here the raise is highlighted, and if I highlight the same as everything else, or not. Okay, it's kind of weird that it worked the whole time, but not now. Okay, oh, that's funny. Okay, so let's imagine that I colored this the same way as the if, and then it looked terrible. All right.
Then why are not making the return green as well?
I mean, that's certainly an option.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not saying, I mean, this is kind of like the opinion part of the presentation.
Sure.
So feel free to disagree with anything I say right now.
Might be nice to highlight returns in Ruby because they're usually not preferred anyway, or unless it's guard clauses. So that might be cool. Yeah.
I'm just wondering why it doesn't work, but
It always doesn't when you need it the most.
well, it worked almost to the end. Okay. Anyway, next slide is okay. I'm pretty much done. I just thought I'd ask a few questions and ask just because I'm curious. So maybe show of hands, who uses a dark or color scheme?
Dark is dark background.
Dark background.